Previously on JSpeaks. And so when you understand your rights and say, you know what, I do have the right to remain silent, I think you should use it, right? And just be compliant. Because if you truly believe in the rule of law, you know that it's going to work out. You don't have to fight. Fighting authority, you're not going to win. Whether it's a police officer, whether it's a principal, whether it's your parent, you're not going to win that battle. So don't try to fight it. Don't fight against authority. Not in that way. Fight it through the rule of law. And so that's what we try to teach them. Your voice is there, but there's a way you do it. And you can come off threatening. And when you come off threatening, yelling, nobody's going to hear you. Just imagine me and you yelling at somebody. You think they're really going to hear what we have to say? Or they only going to hear us screaming at them, right? And so that's what we just try to teach the kids from that social emotional piece of look at it from a different point of view. And how would you feel? Don't you want to go home tonight? You know what I mean? That principal doesn't know what you're going through. Did you communicate that? Did you communicate all that you're going through at home? Did you say anything? Or you just come and yelling and screaming at the principal? You know? You have to take a step back. And it comes back to respect. Respect yourself and respect the people around you.
Introducing the Legal Kid Foundation, empowering youth through the rule of law.
See how things panned out. I did end up getting offered that job and took the chief job up in Ferguson. And man, I could be here for the next 24 hours talking about what that experience was like. But to shorten it up some, I was the chief in Ferguson when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. And with Ferguson being ground zero for Black Lives Matter, you know, his killing, George Floyd's killing, stoked the second round of riots and unrest in Ferguson, and I had to lead the department through those challenges, which, you know, the whole country was dealing with a lot around protests and unrest and things, but Ferguson in particular is a hotbed when things really kick off like that. So that was a very difficult and trying time and experience in my career, but also very impactful because you learn a lot in dealing with, you know, trauma like that, and you learn a lot about yourself, and it helps you to kind of identify, you know, the things that are really important, not just professionally, but personally also.
Are you ready? Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. And for those of you who subscribe to JSpeaks, thank you so much and welcome back. As you know, it is my mission, it is my passion to bring to you all conversation topics that are positive, motivational, educational, and informational. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy to be here with Jason Armstrong, speaker, consultant, leadership coach, and community catalyst. Jason Armstrong is a retired police chief who served communities in Georgia, Missouri, and North Carolina. His award-winning leadership and community engagement has impacted thousands across the country. Chief Armstrong gained recognition when he was appointed police chief of Ferguson, Missouri, 5 years after the unfortunate killing of Michael Brown Jr. He's one of the nation's top voices when it comes to bridging the gap between law enforcement and the communities they serve. As the CEO of Armstrong Consulting, LLC, he now travels the world talking and consulting with government agencies, corporations, associations, and community groups to further his mission of leading positive change through intentional leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit back, relax, and most importantly, listen. And hopefully after today's episode, you understand for yourself that Chief Armstrong brings a wealth of experience and passion for ethical, community-focused policing and continues to make an impact on the future of law enforcement and public safety. So Jason, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person.
Likewise.
So we're here at NCCU.
Yes, the beautiful NCCU.
Yeah, please, share a little bit about yourself and, that NCCU pride. I mean, I graduated from Howard University and, I love my alma mater, but you are a huge NCCU fan, or not a fan, but a graduate.
Yeah, no, I give this place a lot of credit for kind of being the launching pad, if you will, of who I am today. A lot of memories here, some good and some bad. I definitely did a lot of growing up here. Coming to an HBCU that doesn't have all of the nice resources and things that you see at some larger institutions. You have to make a lot of sacrifices, and things are hard for you here. Mm. And coming out of that, the relationships that you forge with the people here have been, lifelong friendships. I played basketball here when I first came to Central, so that's why I came here, was to play basketball. And just that brotherhood, me and my teammates all these years later, still in communication with one another. Homecoming, everybody tries to get back so we can see each other. So it's nothing like the camaraderie that you forge and you build with that HBCU experience. And so most people think that the HBCU is the best HBCU in the country, and I absolutely believe that about North Carolina Central.
Awesome. Was NCCU your first choice?
I can't say it was my first choice. Really, I just wanted to play basketball. And I didn't know much about college when I was coming out of high school. And so I just started shopping, my game film around and different things. And I got an invite to come up here on one of the recruitment weekends, and it just went from there.
Awesome. Well, we can talk about NCCU all day. And
yes.
I know that you love this school. But please, before we officially get started with today's interview, please share a little bit about yourself. Who is Jason Armstrong?
Jason Armstrong, I would say, is a family man, first and foremost, a husband, a father, a son, a brother, and somebody that just tries to bring light into any room or any environment that I'm in, I should say. Grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Was born in Jersey, but we moved here to Fayetteville, North Carolina when I was really young, and grew up in Fayetteville, came to North Carolina Central, and moved to the Atlanta area once I graduated. And I'm sure we'll get into my career in a discussion, but started my career down there, and the rest is history.
Nice. So how do you bring light into a room every time you step into it?
So I can't say it's every time I step into it, but that's always my aim. But really my outlook on things is the world is already tough enough. that I try to have fun in spaces, no matter what the space is. I'm normally trying to find something to lighten the mood, or something to joke about, or just to try to help people not be so serious so much and all the time. And having a career where it's so serious, and the things that I was dealing with and navigating in my profession were life and death at times. You have an appreciation for the moments that aren't that. And when the moments aren't that serious, regardless, they could still be challenging, but if you can find a way to try to interject, some fun and just lighten the mood a little bit, I found that that's often a healthier space for people to be in, because, you never know what somebody is dealing with or what somebody is going through. You mentioned, you're dealing with things. I mentioned I lost a loved one just yesterday. And so everybody is exposed to the trials and tribulations of life. And everybody handles and responds to that differently. One of my approaches is just trying to be lighthearted and trying to be fun as often as I can, because the world is always throwing some challenges at us, and it throws enough at us to keep us down. I'm one of the people that tries to be a little bit more upbeat and have a little bit more fun with it.
I absolutely agree. Now, with regards to people being receptive of that light, do you feel as though when you try to bring positivity, people are receptive of that? Because a lot of times, unfortunately, when people are in a certain mood or a certain state, mindset, they like to stay in that mindset. Sometimes someone's light can make people feel uncomfortable. Do you get
Correct.
that?
And I can absolutely say that there have been times where that has happened with me, where, I'm trying to lighten the mood in the room, and the room wasn't ready for that, or they weren't in the mood for that, and it doesn't land as well. So that absolutely happens. I think more than anything is being an individual where, when people are around you and the vibe that they get from you, that they can kind of feel and assume good intentions. And I think, that's one way that you can kind of overcome, if you will, if whatever you're trying to bring into a space is not landing in that space, or it doesn't land how you want it to land, or the people in that space are not receptive to what it is that you're talking about. In my career and being a police chief in some of the places that I've worked, I've been in some really, really tough rooms, and I've had to address some things or talk about things that I knew people were not going to like, and that people were not going to agree with, either my stance on something or decisions that I'd made or different things like that, where we could be in that space and we can navigate that and still try to come from a place of good intentions, where it's okay for us to disagree on issues, and we're not going to be in a 100% alignment all of the time. But just because we have a difference of opinion, it doesn't mean that I'm attacking you for having your opinion. Doesn't mean that I think any less of you in the opinion or the stance that you have on whatever the topic is that we're talking about. Learning and understanding how to navigate those rooms and those spaces, and really try to land at a space where people don't feel as though if something is not aligned with either their views on something or just the mood that they are in at that moment, it's not coming from a place of trying to be disrespectful or coming from a place of trying to be adversarial or anything like that. It's just, where we landed in the space, we're just on two different, levels, or at two different places with it. But, it's okay for us to be that with one another.
Totally agree. And you hinted on this a little bit, your history being a police chief.
Yes, sir.
So from already virtually meeting you and also perusing on your website, I understand that you serve communities in Georgia, Missouri, and also here in North Carolina, in Apex to be exact.
Yes.
So for me, for the audience, please, talk through your career path to becoming one of the most notable police chiefs in the nation. I want you to discuss key experiences throughout your journey that shaped your trajectory within law enforcement, if you can, please.
Sure. So I'll start right here at North Carolina Central. So I was a criminal justice major here, and my senior year, most pressing thing for any senior is I had to find a job. And my senior year, I learned about this program that the Department of Justice was funding called the Police Corps. The program was targeting, or the program was for college graduates or people that were about to graduate college. So back in the late 90s, rarely did you see somebody go graduate high school, go straight to college, get a 4-year degree in college, and then become a police officer. That wasn't the trajectory to get into law enforcement. More specific, law enforcement heavily recruited from the military back then. And so you didn't have a lot of individuals that just came straight out of college and became police officers. So back in the late 90s, the federal government came up with this program and this idea that if we could incentivize college educated individuals to come into the profession of law enforcement, particularly in lower, economic areas where relationships were often strained between community members and law enforcement, maybe we would see a different outcome, or we would see some better outcomes having these more educated officers out there. So that was the brainchild of the program, and I got accepted into that program, and that's what took me to Georgia to start my career. And so I started, after I finished the program in Georgia, I got hired by the Forest Park Police Department. So Forest Park is in metro Atlanta. So I was in the Atlanta area, spent the first 18 years of my career with the Forest Park Police Department. And what was unique about that experience, when I started with that department, sergeant was the highest position a black person had held in that department. And so if you're not familiar with the rank structure of police departments, at that department, sergeant, that's the first promotion. So that's the lowest level of supervision. So that's one promotion. Your first promotion is to sergeant. So at that department, we went sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major, assistant chief, and then chief. So wow. Sergeant was the highest that any black person had been in that department. And I remember, in my early years, some of the veteran officers, some of the veteran black officers, if they would go through a promotion process and they didn't fare well, I just remember the feeling of hopelessness that they were going to see, more minorities in the supervision ranks, and they didn't feel as though that they were getting a fair shot. And I was young, I didn't know anything about anything, so I have no idea what the process entailed back then. I wasn't a part of it, I wasn't in it. I just remember hearing them talk about that and just how deflated they would feel, and that really birthed in me a motivation that, all right, I hear these guys saying that this, they don't think that this will ever happen, that, they would see blacks in the department get promoted to certain levels of the department. And I was committed to seeing that if I could be the person to do that. And I never forget, actually, I talk about this in my book, is I was out at a restaurant one day and a gentleman stopped me. It was an older black gentleman, and I knew who he was. I had never met him before, but I knew who he was. And at the time, I was an officer in special operations. So I was in a specialty unit, but I had never been promoted, so I had no rank. And he stopped me and he was like, "You're Armstrong, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he says, "All right, we've heard about you, and I'm with another group of community members that we want to see some change in the police department, and we want to see minorities get promoted." And he says, so we're talking about like, who can we get behind that shows promise to be somebody that we can, kind of rally behind. And we want to see, a black person, not just at the sergeant lieutenant level. We want to see them higher up, command level, captain, major, what have you. And so the gentleman gives me his card and he's like, "Me and my group want to meet with you, away from the city when you're off duty to talk about this." So I take his card, say, "Thank you, it was good talking to you." And I never called him. And I didn't want any parts of having any secret meetings and things, because when I accomplished what I was setting out to accomplish, I wanted to accomplish it on my own merit. And I didn't want to have an asterisk beside it that Jason had to go do this, with this group or with that group, or had to do any of that stuff. But, that really helped me get a laser focus in the mission at hand. And once I really started applying myself, eventually I got promoted to sergeant. So the first time I took the sergeant test, I finished number 1 and I got promoted to sergeant. And then a few years later, when the next lieutenant test came around that I was eligible for, I I take that test and I finish first on that list. And so I get promoted to lieutenant, becoming the first black lieutenant in the history of that department. And then I went on to become the first black captain. I was the interim major for a stint, and I even served as the interim police chief in that department for a stint. And so just having that career in Forest Park, and being able to be the first to achieve so many, so many positions, so many ranks, was really an honor for me, and really just gave me just that fuel and that desire to see exactly where I could go and what I could do with my career. Now, unfortunately, my time in Forest Park didn't end on the greatest note. I felt as though that I wasn't being treated fairly, and I was robbed of an opportunity to become the permanent police chief in Forest Park. And because of that, I felt it was time for me to leave and find somewhere else to continue my career. And so I started looking for jobs around the country, because I didn't want to go to a lower level. So if I was leaving, I needed to leave and go somewhere where I was at least at the same level, but I was trying to find a place where I could go where I would be at a higher rank. And it just, as it happens, police chief is the position that is most frequently posted for people outside the organization to apply for. So I was a captain at that time that I was looking to lead. And so assistant chiefs and majors and things like that, a lot of times police departments promote from within at those positions, but when they're looking for a police chief, they open it up to external candidates. And so I started applying for mostly police chief positions, because that's mostly the positions that I'm seeing. And I see this one city that I was familiar with, Ferguson, Missouri. I was looking for a police chief. And what happened in Ferguson in 2014 after Michael Brown was shot and killed by Darren Wilson, and just the unrest and everything that unfolded in that community as a result, I was very familiar with what had happened up there, and just the impact that it had on the profession, and a lot of the tragedies that we saw unfold after that incident happened. And so I look at it, I read through it. They weren't asking me to submit a dissertation for the application process. It was really simple. So I was like, all right, I'll send in my packet for this and see what happens. But realistically, I didn't think that it was a real chance of me getting that job. As we see how things panned out, I did end up getting offered that job and took the chief job up in Ferguson. And man, I could be here for the next 24 hours talking about what that experience was like, but to shorten it up some, I was the chief in Ferguson when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. And with Ferguson being ground zero for Black Lives Matter, his killing, George Floyd's killing, stoked the second round of riots and unrest in Ferguson. And I had to lead the department through those challenges, which the whole country was dealing with a lot around protests and unrest and things, but Ferguson in particular is a hotbed when things really kick off like that. So that was a very difficult and trying time and experience in my career, but also very impactful because you learn a lot in dealing with trauma like that. And you learn a lot about yourself, and it helps you to kind of identify, the things that are really important, not just professionally, but personally also. And so I was the chief in Ferguson for a couple of years. And after that time, my wife is also from North Carolina. And so we're both from here. Our parents still live here. And I learned of the opportunity in Apex, and so we started looking at that as a way that to come back home, be close to the family, especially coming out of the pandemic. Well, it was still going on at the time, but living through the pandemic up until that point, just how chaotic the experience was in Ferguson, we thought, this maybe was a sign that it was time for us to come back home. So I took the job in Apex. They were going through their own challenges at the time. A cultural assessment report had gone public, and it didn't shine the favorable light on the department. And so there were some recommendations that needed to be implemented, some reforms that needed to be done. That was what my experience was in Ferguson coming in, because they were under a consent decree and having to lead all of the reforms for that. So I had quite a bit of experience in navigating and leading reforms and just the challenges that you have to go through and deal with in that. And so I got the Apex job, came back home to North Carolina to finish out my career as the chief there. And now that I'm retired, I wrote my book, put a book out. Now I travel around the country doing consulting and speaking engagements and training classes.
Wow. Thank you for spelling out everything about your career. That was beautiful.
That was abbreviated version, man. There's a whole lot packed in.
I could tell you are definitely a storyteller. I was lost in your words, almost in a trance. So you talked about a lot, but I want to make sure that I ask the appropriate questions for each state.
Okay.
So starting at Georgia, for those I certainly don't know, and also for the audience, what's involved in a lieutenant test?
So it varies from place to place. The process that I had to go through is a lot of times police departments will put candidates through an assessment center. And so the assessment center may involve having to take a written test. Then they're normally going to put together some exercises that you have to complete. So some of the exercises may be, they may give you an in-basket exercise. So let's say, like we're here in this courtyard right here. And so one of the exercises may be that there's a protest planned for right here in the courtyard on this date and time. So you have those buildings, this building behind us. Students are in session. What plan are you going to put together to manage the protest, but also keep operations going, in the community around you? Something like that. They give you different scenarios, if you will, to see, how you would lead in that situation and the decisions that you would make. There may be there's normally some type of role play exercise involved for you to sit and whether you're having to talk to somebody about a disciplinary issue with one of your subordinates. And so how do you handle having that conversation and the tough conversation of telling somebody that they're not meeting the expectations or the standards, or they did something wrong or what have you. So they just test different skills and you get graded on different things. And so they normally bring in people from outside of your department to be assessors for that process, to try to make it a fair process. They typically try to find people that does not know any of the candidates. And so they watch and they observe you for all the exercises, and they grade you on how you do in the exercises. And then there may be an interview with the executive staff or the leadership of the department that you get graded on. And so at the end of it, they compile all of the points for every candidate. And some places do it differently. Some they just go strictly off of points, and however you finish with your points, that dictates where you fall on the list. Some places they don't do points. They grade everybody, and then once they're graded, the chief of the department may go through and say, okay, I like this person based off of how they did, and rank them according to how the chief plans on promoting them. So it's a lot of different ways that it can be done, but there's normally some kind of testing or assessment that's done to identify, who your top candidates are.
So you were the first Black individual within your department to pass that test?
Not to pass it, no. So it's not a pass-fail of the test. It's everybody that's in the process. It's just how you fare compared to everybody else in the process. And so when I went through the process, and my department went off of the point system. So they tallied up all of the points that you earn from each part of the process. And when I went through that, I came out number one on the list. And so they come out with a list. And so that list is just in order of who's up next for promotion. And it just so happened that there was a lieutenant position that was open at that time. And so I was number one on the list. And so I got promoted to lieutenant. So other minorities had gone through the process. They just never finished that high in the process to be promoted. They finished, lower on that list. And once you start getting higher in the department, the number of those positions shrink and shrink and shrink. And so there's not that many opportunities. And so you really have to do good on those processes and finish near the top to have a real chance of being promoted.
So as far as the difficulty of the exam goes, did you finish with flying colors because you were truly that guy, or was what I'm trying to say is, was the test passable? Because for you said 18 years, no one of color was able to get a lieutenant position, taking that exact same.
It had been longer than that.
And you just walk in
the history of the department. So no, and it's not me just walking in and doing it. What I would attribute to myself is being a student of the profession.
Okay.
And
so you felt as though your minority counterparts they didn't have the passion that you had?
No. I'm not saying that they didn't have the passion. I would say a big part of it is timing.
Okay.
And with any opportunity that comes open for somebody, a big component of that is timing. And so I would say I definitely came in at the right timing of things. Now, let's go back to the point system. For my department at the time, one of the things that you got points for was education. I was one of the few officers, minority or non-minority, in my department that had a college degree, a 4-year college degree.
Oh, wow.
And because, like I said, back then that wasn't who came into the profession, because you didn't need one. It wasn't required. Most people got into the profession, they worked for a while, and then once they learned that there was an education incentive, they would start working on their degree while they were already working, and then they would get their degree years later. I came into the door with a degree. And so when it came time to do the sergeant's assessment or the lieutenant's assessment, I walked in with more points than a lot of other people because I already had a degree. So that's where I say that the timing piece really played a part in it, and just how I was positioned coming into it. And you add that to the fact that I was a student of the profession, and how much, I looked, how much I looked ahead. Like, I've always been a forward-looking, forward-thinking individual. And so even though I wasn't a sergeant yet or a lieutenant yet, I'm looking at things that police chiefs are doing. And if there was an incident somewhere in the country and it was getting a lot of media attention, I'm watching the press conference and I'm listening to how the police chief or the sheriff answers questions. And I'm analyzing, okay, all right, I thought that was a really good answer. I understand where they were going. Ooh, I don't know if I would have said that. So I poured a lot of work into working on myself that way, preparing for what was going to be coming down the road, not just looking at where I was and what do I need to do to be good right now in this space. And so I would say timing and my preparation played a big part in how I was able to, when those opportunities came up, man, full steam ahead and take full advantage of it.
Being a police officer was more than just a job to you?
At the beginning, no. At the beginning, it was just a job.
At the beginning, it was just a job.
At the beginning, it was just a job. And it's funny, when I get asked the question, why did you become a police officer? I became a police officer because of the program that I got into, because the federal government gave me $30,000 to become a police officer. Like, that wasn't my salary, that was my incentive.
Wow.
And that's how they did the program. And I qualified for the full $30,000. So that was my motivation to become a police officer. My motivation to stay a police officer is once I got into the profession and I saw the uniqueness that I brought to the space, and I saw the impact that I could have and the difference that I could have being somebody like me, coming from an HBCU and being young black male coming in this profession at 21 years old. I was different. I was different from a lot of my colleagues. You never hear me say I was better than anybody. I was just different. And I had different life experiences, and I just had a uniqueness about me. And when we look at the challenges that we often see in the law enforcement profession, I fit into the space where we had the most challenges and the most problems. And as I matured throughout my career and I started to learn how important that was, and how my voice was needed in all of the rooms that I could get into, because I could speak to the ills and some of the challenges of society from a lens that other people, may not have. And just the more that I started getting into those rooms and sharing my story and using my voice and my experience, whether I was in a law enforcement room or a community room, that's where I really started to see just the power that had. And a story that I share in my book, where I saw the power that has in the profession, I was hooked from that moment on. And I had put together a barbershop community dialogue session, partnered with one of the local barbershops in town. So he was going to open up the space, advertise it to all his customers and people in the community. It was one of our black barbershop owners. And we had this dialogue session in there. Community members came. We talked about policing and what do you do if you get stopped, and what we're looking for, and just how to interact, and trying to help people understand, what's going through our mind in that space. But at the same time, letting community members share for the officers that were in that room, what's going through their mind and things that they're worried about and that they're scared about. And so we created a safe space to have just a really genuine conversation where people could be heard. There was no crisis going on at the moment that forced us to do that. So we weren't dealing with any big event that had just happened. It's like in times of peace, if you will, let's try to get community members together and talk about some of the things that exist. And so we had that event, is highly successful, got a lot of positive feedback from the people that attended. Fast forward a few weeks, now I'm at work, we're looking for this guy, and we know that he's held up inside of a house. And I think we have an arrest warrant for him or something. So he has to go to jail. He is going to jail. And we know he's inside, and we're not going anywhere until we get him to take him to jail. And of course, we're trying to talk to him, because we want the easiest and the safest thing for everybody is for him to just come outside and come to us so we could take him into custody. He's not doing that, so we're putting a game plan together for what it's going to look like when we have to breach the door and go inside and get this guy, which is always the worst situation for everybody involved. It's the worst situation for the community member because they're scared out of their mind. It's the worst situation for the police officers because they don't know what they're walking into. All they know is we have a duty and a responsibility, and we have an oath that we have to upkeep. And this is part of our job. And so if we know that the person is in there that we have to get and take them into custody, then that's what we have to do. And having to kick in a door and then run into a house, not knowing what room the person is in, not knowing if the person is waiting there, wanting to do you harm, like just all of that weighs heavy on the men and women of law enforcement. But that's what we signed up for, so we have to do that. And I was the watch commander, so I'm the person that was in control of this scene. And so I'm standing out there as, my folks are getting ready, we're putting this plan together. And then a gentleman walks up to me. And he's like, hey man, you were the guy that was at the barbershop the other week, leading the dialogue thing. I'm like, yeah, that's me. He's like, all right, man, that's my cousin that y'all are here for. That he's inside the house. And so he called me, he was telling me what's going on, whatever, man. He's just scared and this. I'm like, hey, look, man, he's going to jail. And there's nothing that anybody on earth can do that's going to change that. But man, I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want anything bad to happen. Man, what can you and I work out to get him to surrender, to be taken into custody? Said, man, I just need him to come out of the house with nothing in his hands, with his hands up so my folks can see that he's not coming out and he's no threat to them, so we can take him into custody. So I was able to talk with him and use him to talk to his cousin, to convince his cousin, hey, man, I'm here with the officer that's in charge of all of this. Said, man, they're not going to hurt you. They don't want to cause you any harm. They just need to take you into custody. So we were able to get him out safely, get him into custody safely. Nothing happened. And after it was over with, the gentleman that came up to me was like, man, I'm glad I attended that barbershop event the other week, because I would have never come up to you and had this conversation with you and thought that you would have helped me get my cousin out of this safely. Because, man, I don't get down with the police like that. I don't trust the police, and I don't have a good history, a good relationship with the police. But because I got to experience, just kind of who you are, and I got to have that exposure to you in a space that was non-threatening. And I told you, how when I'm in rooms, like I wanted to be lighthearted, and so we had a good time in there that night. And so because he was able to see just a little of who Jason Armstrong was that night, man, that helped us resolve a situation without anybody having to get hurt, without us having to use force against anybody and things like that. And so once I saw the power that getting into those rooms and having those conversations could have, man, I was hooked. And everything that I was trying to do as a leader in the profession, man, I was always trying to figure out, more creative ways and innovative ways that we can get community members and people into the space, man, to have these dialogues and these conversations for people to get to learn a little bit more about one another.
Wow, I see how and why you rose up the ranks so quickly.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So as you rose up the ranks, did you notice, were you paving the way for other minorities? Like by the time you got to chief?
So I like to think so. So when I left Forest Park, there was one other minority that had been there the whole time I was there, and he had been promoted to lieutenant. He had been promoted to lieutenant before I left. We had multiple sergeants in the department that were minorities by that time, and so we saw a lot more people of color get promoted into some of those positions. And so I if nothing else, and not saying that I created that for them, I'm not saying that at all. I think one of the big things, when people see something is reachable, I think it changes their outlook and their mindset
Absolutely.
on it. And so I think that's all that I was for individuals, is once they saw that it could be done, that somebody that looked like them did it, then I think they had maybe a little bit more confidence, whether it was in themselves or whether it was in the system. But I think they had a little bit more confidence that some of those things were attainable for them. It's like the first individual that ran the 4-minute mile. It took decades upon decades for somebody to do it. Then once he did it, like within a couple months, like several other people had done it because they saw that it was actually doable, it was attainable, and I think it changed their mindset some.
You served as hope.
I hope so.
I mean, you did.
Yeah.
So for someone to just break so many milestones in a department, but then at the end of your tenure in Georgia, you said that they cheated you, or?
I was robbed of an opportunity.
Robbed of an opportunity?
And that's when the politics things come into play. So, this didn't have anything to do with the department itself and the people in the department. It had to deal with the politics of the town and elected officials and everything that goes into that. And so yeah, I was robbed of an opportunity to be the police chief. And once that happened, I didn't make a big ordeal about it. I didn't talk publicly about it or anything like that. I understood the value that I brought to the profession and to the department and to any department. And I just knew it was time for me to take my talents elsewhere. And that's what I did.
Okay. So now moving to Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, talk a little bit more about that emotional development that occurred, that you had to go through being in such a tense city, Ferguson, Missouri, during that time.
Yeah, I didn't fully understand the magnitude of what I was getting myself into until the evening that the council up there was voting on me to be the new chief. And so I knew the vote was happening that night. So me and my wife were home in Georgia at our house. And I had been talking with the city manager. And so I had told him, once the vote is over with, like, just text me and let me know what the vote was. Because I needed to know, because of the experience that I had just had with elected officials, I needed that vote to be overwhelmingly in favor for me to feel comfortable taking the job. And as it would happen, we end up finding a live stream of the meeting, so we were able to watch it in real time. And so watch the meeting, and I see the vote. The vote was 6-1 to confirm me as the chief. And so I'm thinking to myself, and it's in the evening, it's maybe 8, 9 o'clock at night, maybe even a little bit later on the East Coast. And I remember thinking, like, wow, this is amazing. Like, my life is about to be very different. And so I was thinking the next morning I would announce it, to the world on social media and all of that stuff. And that's that night was when I learned, like, just the monster of what Ferguson is and what Ferguson means in the policing landscape, because I just expected to have a peaceful night. It wasn't like, we didn't watch it on the news. It was there was a local social media news group in the St. Louis area, and they went to the meeting. They live streamed it, and so I didn't expect anybody to know about it, learn about it. Man, after that vote, it probably took 15 minutes, and people in Georgia were writing articles about it. Locally, they were writing articles, putting out stories. And man, my phone starts ringing. There's social media is going crazy, and people tagging me and everything, and it blew up that night. And I remember thinking, like, wow, like, this is, we all know what happened in Ferguson in 2014. This was 5 years later, and I didn't know it was going to still carry that much weight behind it once I was voted in as the new chief. And so getting there, I got there 1 month before the 5-year anniversary of Mike Brown's death. And so from the second I stepped foot in the building, it was 100% full steam ahead, trying to prepare and to plan for the 5-year anniversary, with that being such a landmark, if you will, anniversary, and everything that came with it. And then you add in Ferguson has a new police chief. So the media request, everybody was in Ferguson gearing up for the 5-year anniversary of things. And, often when we talk, in the chief world, when a new chief comes in, we normally talk about a honeymoon period and all of that. Like, none of that existed in Ferguson. I had to hit the ground running, and I had to make sure that we got it right for the anniversary, because the world was going to be watching. And the last thing that I needed to have happen was for it to just be a complete nightmare experience. But we had a really good game plan and worked with the family on the events that they were doing and everything. And it went, that 5-year anniversary went as good as it could have gone, for everybody. And it was just a positive event. And no major hiccups or anything like that. And so then it was just the work and focusing on the reforms that needed to be implemented. Ferguson is under a consent decree, which is an agreement with the Department of Justice and a federal judge on the reforms that are going to take place. And up until that point, they weren't getting very favorable reports on what the reform work had been. And so with me coming in, that was, mission number one, was get to the reforms and get this work done. And that's what we started working on. And that was everything that we were trying to do. And so I got there in July of 2019. We had the anniversary, August 2019. So for the rest of that year, just working. Then in January of 2020, we start hearing about, some virus over in China, people in China getting sick, and what is it, and how crazy is it going to be? And then by middle of February, it's now here in the U.S., and I think by the end of February, early March, the world has shut down. And so now we're living in a time that none of us on earth had ever experienced and knew how to navigate or any of those things. And so here I am, brand new police chief still, 6 months on the job, and I'm having to navigate a pandemic where there is no playbook for navigating something like that. And how do you keep people safe? And and we're police officers, so we don't get to go home when everybody else gets to go home. We can't do our job from home. If somebody needs help, we got to be there to provide them with help. If somebody is victimizing the community, it's our job to get that person in cuffs, in custody, and off to jail. But we had a restriction on who could go to jail, and just all of the different challenges of dealing with things. And then May 25th that year, George Floyd gets killed. And then that video comes out, and then everybody in the world gets to see how agonizing it was. That man pleading for his life on the ground in handcuffs, and Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck. And we see that man take his last breaths on this earth, and just what unfolded after that. And May 30th was that Saturday, and that was when they had the first big protest planned in Ferguson. And we knew it was going to be tense. We just didn't know how tense it was going to get. And I was hopeful that the work that had been done, since 2014, even well before I got there, I was hopeful that there had been some healing and that there had been some relationships built and a better understanding. And also I was hoping that people had an opportunity to see that this was a different Ferguson Police Department than the one that you read about in that report from all those years ago. And once the protest started, I was out there in the midst of the crowd talking with people and answering questions and just trying to explain, why I was there and why I had the optimism that I had for what Ferguson could be, especially at that time, because what we saw happen after George Floyd got killed was a lot of community members and entities and people were screaming for all of these changes in the profession, and they wanted things to be outlawed, and they wanted us to be stricter on this, and they wanted more accountability. They wanted all of those things, and they wanted policies to be changed, where when we looked at all of our stuff in Ferguson, we already had all of that stuff on the books. So we had already done all of that stuff because we had already been through that situation after the Mike Brown incident. And so this was a time for us to be able to highlight the work that we had been doing there, because I didn't have to change a single policy after George Floyd was killed, because all of our policies were already updated with the best practices in the country. And so now everybody's trying to catch up to what Ferguson was already doing. But that didn't save us, and that didn't protect us from what came on May 30th. And it started out in the daytime, and when it was daytime, the protesters were not violent. Now, people will say, peaceful protesters. If somebody's threatening to kill me or kill my officers or do harm to my children or my wife, my family and stuff, I don't call that peaceful. And so I won't label it a peaceful protest, but I will say that it was not violent during the daytime. But once it got dark, nighttime ensued, that's when the violence erupted, and rioters attacked my officers with explosives and fireworks and all kinds of things. They attacked the building with bats and pipes and bust out all the windows, start launching explosives and incendiary devices, Molotov cocktails and things through the windows, trying to burn the building down. And that activity went on for hours. It started, I think, right before 10:30 p.m. And I think we were finally able to push out all of the rioters around 2 or 2:30 in the morning. My officers are being shot at from all different sides of the building. And so, when I talk about it, the only way I can describe it is it was a war zone. Being out there in the midst of that, you hear explosions from the commercial grade fireworks going off, being thrown at groups of officers and things. You hear gunshots, bullets whizzing around, smoke in the air, because we started using tear gas, trying to fight back and trying to disperse the crowd and things. And it was just an unimaginable environment to be in, and living through it moment by moment was traumatizing. There's no other way to describe it. And I remember it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. I bring everybody inside. So, we're done for the night. It has ended for the night. We bring everybody inside, and I try to muster up some words of encouragement to tell my officers that had just lived through pure hell. And I remember just the feeling of hopelessness that I had, because I knew the next night we were going to be doing the exact same thing all over again. And that's exactly what happened. They came back the next night, same thing, daytime, nonviolent protests. Once night ensued, that's when rioters came out, looters came out, damage, destruction, violence, and all of that stuff. So we had 2 nights of that. By the 3rd night, the governor had activated a state of emergency, and I had the National Guard at the police department the 3rd night. And so that 3rd night, they didn't come to Ferguson Police Department. They went downtown St. Louis. And at the end of that night, by the end of that night, rioters had shot 4 St. Louis police officers, and looters had killed a retired police officer who was doing security at a pawn shop. They had broken into the pawn shop, and he tried to stop them, and they shot and killed him. And that was Monday night. And just like I said, that was the climax, if you will, of what we were dealing with in the aftermath of George Floyd, and just how difficult and challenging it was. And if I'm being 100% honest, like after those 3 nights, like I questioned, what I was doing, and why am I here? My family, it's traumatizing for them, for me going out there every day, having to deal with that, and the one that all of the responsibility fell on of how things went, and how things were handled. And it was just a tough time. And we got through it. After that night, that Monday night when they shot the officers, after that night, we didn't have any more violence towards law enforcement. And then we just started having protests every day, which the protests every day was fine, because nobody was out there destroying anything, and there wasn't any violence attached to it. And we just, went through that. We had weeks and weeks of that, and was just trying to still, COVID is still running rampant. People are dying left and right. Now a vaccine is starting to come around, and all of the controversy around that, is it safe and everything, and trying to navigate all of that stuff, where you out there in the protests, and hell, I might have 300 or 400 people surrounding me, majority of them not going to have a mask on, and just all of that stuff. And so your safety was in jeopardy in a multitude of ways that we had never even seen before, because at that time it wasn't just, is somebody going to physically harm you, but somebody could be standing in this crowd, in this group that has COVID, with no mask on, yelling and screaming at me, and am I going to catch COVID from that? Am I going to take that home to my family? Like, all of that stuff was difficult. But I would tell you where the tides turned, and where I started to regain some hope in things, was, so that was June. So pretty much all of June of 2020, we had to deal with protests. And we have July. Before you know, we're right back in August. And August 9th is the anniversary for Mike Brown's death. And so we're right back to the anniversary again. And although we had a very successful 5-year anniversary, I knew the 6th-year anniversary was going to look very differently, because the tensions in the country were still so high, and everything that was unfolding in Louisville with Breonna Taylor at this point, and just all of these things. And so now I'm back preparing for another anniversary, and I'm like, man, this one is going to be a lot more difficult to navigate and to deal with, because the world is a different place than what it was a year ago when I was preparing for this. And that first year, when I went to the memorial that they have for Mike Brown Jr., and so they have it on Canfield Drive, on the street where he was shot and killed, where his body laid in the street. And that first year, the family knew I was going to come to it, and I went to the memorial. like I said, I had only been there for a month, and so I hardly knew anybody in that community at that point. And I went in uniform, and I got down there, and that day might have been the first time in my career where like I was nervous about somebody trying to do me harm just because I was a police officer in uniform, because like I had never seen people look at me with such venom and animus in their eyes. And I don't fault them for it, because I understood why that was. You know, me being there in the Ferguson police uniform, I represented the source of their pain. I represented, you know, who took their loved one from them on that day 5 years earlier when I went that first year. And you know, I was down there by myself. I didn't take any officers with me or anything. And just the whole time I'm looking around and people are just ice grilling me, and I'm like, oh man, like, this might be a mistake. Like maybe I shouldn't have come down here for this. And I just remember thinking, like, you know, the whole time I'm looking around, because we're out in the open in the street, so people are all around, and like there's nowhere for me to, you know, not hide, but you know, there's no place for me to put my back up against where I can see everything. I'm out in the open, I'm exposed, and you know, just hoping that nothing bad would happen, and it didn't. The event ended, and as soon as it ended, I got out of there and just, you know, counted my blessings that nothing bad happened and nothing disrupted the memorial service. But following the next year, and as bad as things were, and recounting what my experience was the year before, I made up my mind that I wasn't going to go to it. And because I knew we were going to have some protests that night, and you know, possibly another round of civil unrest and rioting. So I was like, I'll just, you know, stay away from the memorial and just work on our plan and making sure that we have everything covered for whatever may happen that night. Excuse me. And about 2 weeks before the anniversary, I'm in my office and I'm opening up my mail, and I open up a letter from the Brown family, from Mike Brown Sr. and his wife Kyle. And not only were they inviting me to come to the memorial service that year, they were inviting me to be a speaker at the memorial service. And I'm like, dang, like, man, why are they doing this to me? Like, I wasn't even planning on going, and now they want me to speak at it. And in that letter, one of the excerpts from it, it said something along the lines of, you know, we see all of the good work that you're doing out in the community. So at this point, I had been in Ferguson for a year. We see all of the good work that you're doing out in the community, and we think that your participation in this event as the chief would send the message that everybody in the community needs to see about how you mend relationships or build bridges, or how you work together and all of this stuff. And I'm just like, dang, like, there's no way that you can turn that down. And so I respond to it, and I confirm that I'm going to be there. And I go, as much as I was dreading going, and I credit that day to being one of the best days of my career because of what the experience was, because it was a night and day experience of what I expected it to be. Now, it started off exactly how I expected the energy to be. So I took a detail with me this time. And so I had some officers with me, and as we're walking down the street to get to the memorial site, the event had like their own security. And so these were just some community guys. Missouri is an open carry state, so, you know, guns everywhere. Everybody has guns. You can have them out in the open, and it's perfectly legal. And as I'm walking down the street, they see me and my detail coming. And so like 3 guys with AR-15 rifles come, and they stand lining the street, like kind of to block me from getting down to the memorial. And as I got close to them, you know, so they're holding their guns, and, you know, it's like, man, what y'all doing here? Like, leave us alone, and we don't want y'all here, yada, 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 yada. And that was just the energy that some people were on, or what we were dealing with, you know, in the nation towards law enforcement after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And so I have a quick conversation with them, and then I walk around them and I go down to the thing, and I don't spend too much time entertaining that nonsense. But while I'm down there, I have some conversations with people that I knew who they were, but I had never met them before. And we just had some really, really good conversations. And I remember one gentleman in particular, man, me and him talked a great deal. We had a great conversation. And at the end of it, he was like, man, you've earned my respect because you came down here with us and you spent time with us here in our space. And we don't see that a lot from people in your position or from, police leaders or law enforcement leaders or what have you. And so, man, you earn my respect, man, for being down here today. And that meant the world to me, and having him tell me that, because I didn't want to be down there, and I didn't plan on going down there. And God had other plans for me that day, and it turned out to be one of the most impactful experiences that I had, which even further fueled my commitment to community outreach and engagement, and how much that mattered. And like I said, the stories and the experiences that I can now go around the country and share, trying to motivate other law enforcement leaders and people in the profession to make this a priority of how they police and how they engage with their community every day, because some of the results that I've had as a result of it, man, are unmatched. And if that was the staple of the foundation for what all law enforcement was doing, we would see much better results in a lot of communities in the country.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. That was very nice. I gotta ask, you brought up and you mentioned violent protests, COVID, colleagues, fellow officers getting shot, mean mugged at certain memorial services, not feeling welcomed. I gotta ask, what soft skills, characteristics, attributes did you have to sharpen, fine tune, or you had to force yourself to bring out of you in order to be sane in those environments? Because Ferguson, or Missouri just in general, what you dealt with in that type of climate, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I'm sure you can't compare that to anything that you've ever been through before.
Correct.
So it had to bring something out of you that was different from Georgia, different from college you, in order for you to stay sane or just sharpen,
So I wouldn't say it brought anything different out of me. My approach, especially as I matured through life, when I started this profession, I was 21 years old, straight out of college. So I was immature as could be. And my career, it forced me to grow up faster than a lot of people my age, because I had a very serious and important job. And like I said, it was life or death in doing that job. So it forced me to mature. Now, as I climbed the ranks in leadership positions, one thing that was always top of mind for me is, like, all right, I know who Jason Armstrong is, and I like to have fun. I like to have a good time. Now, people think I'm serious all the time because I just have a naturally serious looking face, I guess, I don't know. But I love to enjoy myself and to have a good time. And that is who I naturally am. By the time I became a police chief, one thing that I was very intentional about and that I felt very strongly about was, if people could see and experience who Jason Armstrong is, man, I think they would love Chief Armstrong. And so I tried to be my true self as a police chief. And so being in those spaces and just the uniqueness that exists, when you're the police chief anywhere, but it's especially at a place like Ferguson, with their history and the challenges that they deal with, nobody gave a doggone that I was the police chief. That title didn't mean nothing. If there was some smoke to catch, you were going to catch it. So nobody cared that you were the police chief. And so, man, I never walked around as if, okay, I'm important because I'm the police chief. I went into spaces that I would go anywhere. If you invited me, I was going to show up if I was available to show up. And it didn't matter where it was or who was going to be there or any of those things, because I needed people to get to know who Jason Armstrong was. I needed people to fall in like with Jason Armstrong. And if I could do that and they could see who I was as a person and as an individual and what I brought to my role as police chief, what I brought to the police department, then my aim was that in times of crisis, that would buy me some time, and that would buy us some time for people to wait to hear, you know, what the facts were or the details or what have you, instead of automatically jumping to the conclusion that the police did wrong, or, you know, the police are doing this or doing that, or this is a repeat of what happened here, there, or even in Ferguson previously. And so I had it in me already. Now, what I would say was Ferguson and the platform that you have when you're the chief in Ferguson, it scared me so much. The fear is what sharpened what was there. So like, I think I had that foundation already, but being so scared to mess up and being so scared to be a spark that made life difficult for anybody, whether it was my officers or the community, like that fear is really what sharpened my skills and my approach to things, because I understood the power of my voice and my actions. And you know, as much media as I did up there, if I got in front of the cameras and if I said the wrong thing, that could ignite very quickly another round of protests, or even worse, another round of riots and unrest. And so understanding that regardless of who I'm talking to, if I'm speaking publicly, there are a lot of ears that are listening, or what I say, you know, is going to be shared or is going to be magnified or what have you, and understanding the different audiences that you're speaking to all at the same time. And so I had to learn and I had to sharpen how to deliver a message where I wasn't aiming to not piss anybody off, because that's impossible. You know, whatever I say, you know, undoubtedly somebody is not going to like it. But back to the point I was making earlier, is learning and being sharp where you can say those things and people understand that where you're coming from is not from a place of disrespect or a place from doing harm or a place of diminishing, you know, one group over another group. And that's what I had to sharpen. And that's what Ferguson taught me, was how to do that a whole lot better. Because, you know, in trying to navigate all of the challenges and obstacles that we had to navigate, the last thing that I wanted to do was for something to land the wrong way, or a way that I had no intentions of it landing, and then that created even more problems or challenges for us.
So it bolstered your confidence in yourself and what you bring to the table, or what you brought to the table.
It bolstered my confidence, but I would say, you know, the fear. And
yeah, the fear bolstered your confidence.
Oh, absolutely. And the fear, like, helped me lock in a lot better. Like, that's what fear does for me. That's what, like, I don't look at fear as a bad word, or people think, you know, if you talk about being scared and fear like you're weak or anything, you know, it may mean that if your actions show that. When fear creeps into, you know, my psyche, it forces me to focus, because, you know, losing is not an option, failure is not an option, you know, just like those things become completely oblivious to me, because I know, like, man, when I'm scared of something, or I have a fear that this could not go right or what have you, like, I'm going to lock in like at no other time and do everything in my power to, you know, to make sure that I'm successful in that space.
I like to describe it as, it brings out like the fight or flight in us.
Oh yeah.
And it's just a rush of adrenaline, and just being the person that you are and the person that I am, you know, we want to succeed, we want to put our best foot forward, we want to, you know, do good for the world, or for the people that we're trying to impact. Yeah. And we're very particular about how we're going to do that. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I can definitely relate to that.
Yep.
So moving now to North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
So talk about your legacy in Apex, right? Mm-hmm. In helping the agency and others as a leader in the department.
So when I came to Apex, Apex was dealing with their own unique challenges at the time, and I largely feel that's why I was selected to come in at that time. And now nothing like the challenges in Ferguson, but a report had been done on the Apex Police Department. That report had some recommendations for changes that need to be implemented, and that report as a whole just did not shine favorably on the department, and that's what I came into. And so my kind of my marching orders, if you will, in coming into the department was to work on the reforms that were laid out in this report, and really to just do an assessment of the organization, my own assessment of the organization, having been in multiple agencies by that point, and having been an outside chief to come into an agency previously, I had experienced some of this before. And so coming into Apex, I had to learn a brand new community all over again. I had to learn a brand new agency all over again. And that's taxing in itself. And anytime you're the police chief, you have a challenging job and just a challenging task in front of you. But I'm very proud of the work that we did in Apex and the things that we implemented and how we work with the community in trying to achieve some of the things that we were trying to achieve. Because when I got to Apex, there was a specific, segment group of the community that did not have any confidence in the police department, did not have any trust in the police department. And when I'm in a community and I become aware of individuals that have that kind of outlook on law enforcement, those are always the people that I target to try to partner with and try to work with, because I genuinely believe, regardless of what your outlook may be on law enforcement or a particular police department, a department that I'm leading, I know what our commitments are going to be and what is going to be our focus at all times. And it's how do we show up better for the community every day, and how are the decisions that we're making coming from a place that's rooted in how is this beneficial and how is this helping the community and members of the community. And so if you have a negative outlook on us, if I'm able to bring you into the fold of what it is that we're doing and you're able to see it and experience it for yourself, you won't be able but to love us and have confidence in what it is that we're trying to do, because it's all rooted in the community and community policing, community outreach and engagement, and how do we get better outcomes as a result of that. And so that was the work, and that was my approach in Apex. And we had tremendous success with it, and bringing people in that, when I got there, didn't even feel comfortable walking through the doors of the police department for any reason, because they had such a negative history or a bad experience or outlook or what have you, to where, over 3 years later when I'm leaving, they come in anytime they felt like it, and we could have meetings there and talk about things, and I'm getting phone calls about stuff, and that relationship, really, really had grown. In addition to trying to do things in the police department and make changes that would lead to results out in the community, trying to improve just the overall efficiency and make life easier for the officers, in the job that they have to do, because Apex is a very fast growing community. And the community is growing a lot faster than the police department is growing. And so we had to be creative and innovative with the things that we were doing and how we were trying to tackle the problems that were going on. And, one thing that I was proud of, so I retired in the end of October of 24, and in December, I forget what group put it out, but one of the magazine or paper articles came out about the safest cities in the country and the safest cities in each state. and Apex came out #1 for North Carolina in that December article, and that I was really proud of that, because one of the things that I would get criticized for in the profession was, people not having the confidence that my approach to policing and community policing, which I put such an emphasis on community outreach and engagement, and I didn't talk about just the heavy-handed enforcement piece a whole lot. That's part of it, but that wasn't the primary thing for me. And they would, some of the critics of my approach would look at it that, okay, he's being soft on crime, or he's being soft on enforcement. And so if we're not out here enforcing any and everything, then, people are going to run amok and crime is going to be out of control and it's going to be crazy. Where my approach was, if we build enough relationships in the community, it would make it easier for us to fight crime, because we have more people willing to call us and talk to us about things, because we have more relationships with people, and trying to get, people to understand, trying to get the officers to understand, how it's all correlated and how it all works together, for us to see some positive results in what it is that we're doing. And so, to have that come out, not even 2 months after I left, to see, years of work that went into that, and how we were able to build some of the relationships that we were able to build, and implement some of the programs that we implemented, and doing things that, people weren't seeing anywhere else in the country. And then also having some of those results that we can put out there also. These, this is all of that work and all of the hard work that went into this. This is some of the payoffs, that we see from it.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's definitely sounds serious. I mean, the #1 safest community in North Carolina?
Yep.
That's a big deal. And you were at the forefront of that. So would you say that from leaving Missouri, coming to North Carolina or Apex, all that you went through in Missouri, did it prepare you for Apex? Was like Apex a cakewalk? Or is each community, I guess, assessed separately?
Yeah, every community is its own.
Even after all that growth.
Yeah, even after all of that, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with people, and people are the most uncontrollable variable that a leader has to deal with. And so every situation was very different. Now, my experience as a chief, like, I greatly appreciated what these last 3+ years were for me in Apex, because it was a much healthier experience for me than my time in Ferguson. Just on a personal note, I wasn't dealing with all of the chaos and just the craziness, that comes with being the chief in Ferguson. And so I definitely got a break from that level of trauma. But being a police chief is hard, man, and you're dealing with people. And so when I came to Apex, I had a much larger department than what I had in Ferguson. So I had, almost 3 times the amount of people to deal with it. So the more people you have, the more issues that are going on, the more challenges that you have to deal with, the more personnel matters, and just all the things that come with being responsible and in charge of human beings, and as complicated as human beings may be at times, and especially when you're the individual that people look at to fix their problem, or to change something that they want to see change, or to do something that they want to see done. Like, when you are the focal point of all of that, you're never going to please everybody, and so each community has its own set of unique challenges that you deal with, and that's what makes each chief job that you may have so different from the other one. Now, the beauty of it is you learn from experiences, and so each stop that I had, and especially the fact that I sat in the chief's seat at each department that I worked at, and so having that experience of being the police chief at each one, each time I went to the next one, I had some experiences as the police chief that I was taking with me that could help me navigate things differently or navigate things better, or, would help me have some conversations on the front end for something that I learned, over here. And so that carries, that carries along with you, where now, in my consulting business, having all of the experience that I have of sitting in the chief seat in 3 very different communities, and everything that I learned from those experiences, especially the experience in Ferguson and living through, just all of the chaos and stuff up there that most chiefs will never see or experience in their career. Now I have a body of experience that I'm able to travel around the country and share my expertise and my experience with others to help them navigate some of the challenges that they're navigating, and to help put things in perspective to where a lot of times people want answers from you, even in consulting. Well, tell us how to do this. It's not my job to tell you how to do that, because my experience in doing that is not here. So I can tell you what the framework looks like and what a process may look like for you to go through, for you to figure out what's the best way for you to do that here. But I can't tell you how to do it here, because just because I did it this way in North Carolina or in Georgia or in Missouri, that doesn't mean that it's going to work like that in New York or in California or in Florida or what have you. And so it's helping people understand that, I'm here to help you create the process that would be most conducive for your community. But you know your community way more than I do. But, these are the things that you want to think about and how you build that up. And so each stop, you're just adding and adding to your bucket of knowledge and your overall expertise in how to navigate, leadership. And that's what I focus on now. That's why I wrote my book. And it, just focuses on a lot of leadership stuff and the challenges of leadership and how you navigate that, and some of my successes, some of my failures, and all of the things in between, because all of that is going to be a part of a leader's journey. And I don't know of any leader that hasn't failed multiple times and hasn't failed on hard times or challenges and all of those things. And all of that is a part of the leadership journey. And I happen to have some very unique stops along the way on my journey, where I was able to take in a whole lot of stuff, and I was exposed to a whole lot of things on just varying different degrees of issues and things that I had to navigate, that now that I'm retired, man, I'm able to take that and I'm able to share it and work with people all over the country, and ultimately, hopefully all over the world, to help them navigate things a little bit better.
Well, share a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about, share some insights on the challenges of leadership and the difficulties of driving change in a community.
So, when we talk about change, I always put positive in front of it, because anybody can drive change. But if you drive negative change, you're hurting things, you're not helping anything, right? And so the first thing is we need to name what exactly it is that we're after and that we're seeking. And I was always after positive change. And the biggest thing, or the biggest challenge to it, is helping people understand how things are connected. I had a session with a leadership coach one time, and it was extremely helpful for me, because I had to take this assessment test before we met, and she got the results and analyzed it, and so she could tell me how my brain worked and all of that stuff. And what she explained to me was, how my brain works is, if there is a problem or a challenge directly in front of me, I don't just look at that problem and challenge and think about, all right, how do I fix it and how do we move forward from here? She explained the way my brain works is I look and I assess this challenge, and then I go backwards and I look at the past and, how did we get here? How did this challenge happen? Or why does this problem exist? What contributed to it? What are some factors that were missed, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it may be. And she said, I'll go backwards. So now when I start looking at the problem, I'm not looking at it from this direction and just going straight. She's like, I'm coming over top and I'm looking at it far reaching of down the road. And the way she explained it to me, I was like, this makes perfect sense, because that often spoke to the challenge that I had in trying to get people to understand my vision for what it was that we were doing. Because I often felt as though like they're just looking at the here and now and what impacts them at this very moment, not understanding this is the impact of things. Heck, you may not even have been here when these things happen, but this contributes to what's going on present day. And I'm using all of this and looking to see not where can we go tomorrow. I'm looking to see where we can go a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And because when I think about impact and when I think about having a positive impact, it has to be something that is sustainable. And when I look at sustainability, I look at it from a lens of it shouldn't just be sustainable because I'm sitting in the leader seat. You know, what can I build? What can I create? Or what can I get people to build and create that regardless of the pieces that are inserted in, whether you're the leader or the manager or, you know, you're the worker bee, we can exchange different pieces, but we have built a system, a framework, or a process that just sets us up for positive success and positive impact. It doesn't matter who's plugged into it. And so that was always my approach to things, and trying to get people to understand that and to see that it's just a lot of hard work and it's a lot of frustration that goes into it, because sometimes I can never find the words to clearly explain it in a way that people understood it. So when that's the challenge, then what I always try to fall back on is, in doing this, inevitably an example is going to present itself to us. And once that example presents itself, all right, now I can use that example to try to explain my point and push it forward. One of the most probably controversial reforms that I implemented here in Apex. So the Office of Professional Standards, most police departments have an Office of Professional Standards within the department. And that's often the unit division where complaints are handled or reviewed, complaints against officers, if there's an internal affairs investigation, allegations of misconduct, like all of that stuff is normally handled through the Office of Professional Standards and the Internal Affairs Division or Bureau, if they have one. And across the country, everyone that I know of, Office of Professional Standards, has sworn police officers that either lead it or have integral parts in the Office of Professional Standards. And it's one of those things where, all right, you have somebody that is a police officer, has gone through all of the same training and all of that stuff, that analyzes the complaints, compares them to the policies, and renders findings that go up to, you know, whoever is the final person to sign off on it. And one of the things that I wanted to do, especially after my experience in Ferguson when I came into Apex, is I wanted to convert the Office of Professional Standards to all civilian staff. So I didn't want any sworn officers working in the Office of Professional Standards. Okay. And very controversial inside a police department, because mostly you have officers and complaints and stuff are normally against your police officers. And by and large, police officers, you know, have an outlook on things that if you've never done this job and you've never been a police officer on the streets, then you shouldn't have any say-so in reviewing and analyzing the work that we do, because you don't get it. You don't know it, you don't understand it, because you've never been in these situations. And I get that, you know, I get that outlook. And for a large part of my career, you know, I had that same outlook, or there are certain things when people talk about the profession that I still have that outlook on. But when it came to reviewing our actions, my experience gave me a different outlook on the power of, if we had people who had never done this job before analyzing it, that would make us better. That would make us better, that would make us sharper. And then when we talk about what's going on out in the community, or we have community members that are upset about something, or they had an experience, what would give the community member more confidence in how we're analyzing the work that we do if I say I have a police officer that is reviewing the work of this police officer to see if the police officer did anything wrong, or if I could say I have somebody who is essentially a regular citizen just like you, has never been a police officer a day in their life, looking at this, reviewing this. What would you expect people to have a little bit more confidence in the process of me explaining that to them, especially the times that we're living in right now and people's outlook on the profession. And so that's, my outlook on it is, man, this is going to give us more legitimacy in the community when, we can stand up and say, like, all right, people talk about all the time that they don't trust the police to police themselves. But now I don't have police officers policing ourselves. And so I created a position. We hired somebody for it who is an attorney by trade, had been a former district court judge and a former assistant district attorney. That was the person's background. And that was the person that I had reviewing all of our complaints and every use of force and all of those things, and comparing it to policies to see what we were doing and really analyze it to make sure that we were doing everything within our power to be, open and honest with ourselves more than anything else, and make sure that the level of accountability that we had in the organization was unmatched by anybody else in the profession. And as you can imagine, though, but implementing a change like that, did not go over, very well. And it's and it's one of those things where it takes time, where one of the best lessons that I learned about being a police chief and about leadership is sometimes, like, there is no way to, sometimes, like, you're not able to land a message softly. Like, people are going to hate it, and there's no easy way to say it to make it any more digestible for them. And what I learned is when I know I'm dealing with a situation like that, my words have to be as matter of fact as possible. And I have to be as clear as possible that I understand that people are not going to like this, or that you're skeptical of it. I get it, and I understand all of that. This is what it is that we are doing, and this is what my expectations are for how we will be as an organization and how things are going to move from here. And I need everybody to get in line and to get on board with this, regardless of what you think about it. And I would say often, like, I didn't make decisions for people to like. And one of the best lessons that I learned throughout my career is explaining and conveying to people that I'm not moved by whether or not you like my decision or not. Like, once I'm in the leadership seat, it's my decision to make. I carry 100% of the responsibility for it. Okay. And so, man, I'm going to go through a process, and if you are true about trying to go on this journey with me, then you will learn where these things are coming from, how my mind kind of works, and what my aim and what my goal is for the results, to where you're not assuming bad intentions or that my decisions are coming from a bad place. And what will help you along in that is knowing that I don't care if you like it or if you dislike my decision. I care 100% if you understand it. And the aim for me was always understanding. I see leaders get into trouble because they're trying to be liked by the people that they're leading, or they want people to feel comfortable or a certain way with things, where with some of the decisions that you have to make, your decision has to be rooted in the right thing, and that you're making the decision that you genuinely 100% believe is the right thing to do. No matter what the results may be of it, or how favorable or unfavorable it may be for you. Now, if I can, make a decision that's going to get everybody in my department a big raise, of course, everybody's going to love me for that. But I can't hang my hat on that, because the very next day, I may have to make a decision that the majority of people are going to hate. And I can't say, well, you should love me for the decision that I made yesterday that got everybody more money, and just be happy with that. No, every decision stands on its own. And with this decision right here, I don't care if you like it or you don't like it. I care everything if you understand it or not. and here's where I'm coming from with it, and this is, you know, what my commitment to anybody is, whether I'm talking to an employee inside my agency, or I'm talking to a community member, or I'm talking to an elected official. Like, the same approach was applied to everybody, and the number one thing that I learned is that I had to have consistency as a leader, because if I'm in front of this group, my message can't be different than when I go talk to this group over here, because now I'm playing to the group that I'm in front of. Now, I may have to deliver the information differently because of who the audience is, but where I'm coming from and the intentionality about what it is that I'm talking about, or why I'm refusing to waver on my outlook on something, like, none of that is going to change. And it was something that just over time, you know, I had to get more comfortable and more confident in telling people, especially people who thought or their outlook on things was that, you know, they had more positional authority that I did in the space, where I didn't have a problem telling anybody that you've never sat in my seat. And, like, I'm sorry, but if you've never been a police chief and had to deal with what I have to deal with, like, you can't tell me how to make decisions as a police chief. Now, you can give me all the advice and the guidance, you know, in the world, and from your lane, you can tell me what you think about it, and I'm always going to be receptive of that. But, you know, until you've had to make these decisions under the pressure that I had to make these decisions, you know, it's going to be different.
So when you're in a position of leadership, you shouldn't be a chameleon. You shouldn't be a puppet. You need to have your own backbone and stand firm on the policies that you set forth for the community. Now, two things. Was the pushback mainly from your colleagues or from the community? And number two, is your policy still in order to this day for Apex?
So I would say, so a little bit of both.
So your pushback was from the community? The whole point of you doing it was for the community.
But here's the thing: is everybody is never going to be aligned with anything.
Yeah.
And so I know that there were some members of the community that had very close relationships with members of the department. And so if they weren't happy about something that was going on, or something that I changed or implemented, then naturally those community members were not going to like what it was that I was doing, because they were talking to the people that didn't like. So that's always going to be the case. Now, to your question, has some of the things been changed? Yes, some of the things that I implemented have been changed.
Wow.
And which, and like,
even after you won the award of the...
Yeah. Because awards don't matter.
They don't matter?
Yeah. Even to me, like, awards, that's totally different than what being in the trenches of leadership really is. There are no awards for being in the trenches of leadership, right? And so, I did get some phone calls, you know, after I left, once some community members that were very favorable of some of the things that I had implemented started learning that things were being changed, or some of the stuff that I implemented was being undone and whatnot. And I don't harbor any ill will for that. Like, every leader that comes into a situation has to make the decisions that they feel is in their best interest and the best interest of the department at that time. And so, you know, no police chief has all of the answers and does 100% the same thing as any other police chief. And we just know, like, we're all different. We're all different individuals. We have different outlooks on things. And that's largely when you have a changing of the guard, that's always going to be a part of it. And so that's something that I expect to see. And that's where having the relationships with the community comes into play, to where just because somebody changed something that I implemented doesn't make them wrong for doing so, just because you don't like it. No different than some of the things that I did that some people in the community may not have liked. You know, it doesn't make me wrong for doing it. That's where the engagement piece comes into play. And don't assume bad intentions. Like, all right, you liked, you know, this one thing that had been implemented. Now that's been changed. All right, go have a conversation and hear what their level of explanation, to help you get some understanding as to why they're doing what they're doing, and that they have a different approach from it. Just because you were a fan of me, like, that doesn't matter. And that goes back to when I talk about the things that you put into place. Like, I didn't put anything into place for Jason Armstrong. everything I put into place was for, while I was here in Apex, was for the Apex Police Department and the Apex community. In Ferguson, for the Ferguson Police Department, for the Ferguson community. Once I leave, all right, I just hope that we set a framework in place that allows for sustainable progress and success. So I know people are going to change some of the things that I did. It's fine. My hope for it is what we built with our outreach and engagement efforts. I have community members now that are engaged, that they can come have that conversation, and they feel comfortable and confident coming to have that conversation, and allowing the new leadership to explain, why they're going in a different direction with something, or in their analysis or assessment, yeah, that may have worked for that time in place for what was going on and what we were dealing with, but now, we're past that. And so now what we're dealing with and what we're seeing, these things are more applicable and more appropriate for us. So give us, I understand you like what had been put in, but this is not the same place, or we're not dealing with the same thing that we were dealing with 3, 4, 5 years ago. All right, give us some time to make some changes and to try some things and stay engaged. Let me know what you're hearing or what you're seeing from your lens or what have you. That's how you get a process and a framework set in place that sets up a community for success, to where it doesn't matter who the chief is or who in leadership is. Everybody in there understands the role and the contribution that they can have to whatever's going on, and people can stay engaged and have that, that dialogue.
Beautiful. I definitely agree.
Yeah.
So I also want to make sure that I talk about your book that you've been hinting at for this whole interview. I'm done here. Creating lasting impact with intentionality.
By leading with intentionality.
By leading with intentionality. I'm sorry, my fault. Please, talk a little bit more in detail about what your book entails, and especially, I'm done here. Where did that title come from? That's very interesting.
The title came from a lot of back and forth between the publishing company and me. Because I had all kinds of titles and stuff, but when you're doing a book, there's all these rules and guidance, and title can't be but oh so long, can't be but oh so short. It has to do this, it has to do that, and so we did a lot of work on just trying to come up with a good title. And one thing that that was non-negotiable for me was I wanted a book title that didn't exist. So you could have books with the same title, but they would have different subtitles. And, that's how you could differentiate between the different books. I wanted a book title that nobody else in the world had. And so I was a hard line on that. And so some of the earlier titles that we had come up with, when I researched them, I saw other people had them, were very similar. And so what the title entails is, my book is a leadership book. And so it chronicles my journey in leadership. And then just, the why behind, why and how I led, some of the lessons learned, why the community was so important to me, and then some of the results of just my body of work and my commitment to doing this. And what I talk about in my outlook on it is anybody that's in a leadership seat, they sit in that seat for a finite period of time. Like, nobody sits in a leadership seat forever. And some people may sit in it for a long amount of time. Some people may sit in it for a short period of time. Some people may control when they leave that seat. Sometimes people are pushed out of the seat by other people. But regardless of how it unfolds, there's a point where it ends. There's a point where you're done there. Whether it's on your own accord and wishes, or if somebody made that decision for you. We all hit that point where you're done there, where I'm done here. And so my outlook on leadership is, once that moment comes and you're done here, when you look back on your time in that seat, will you be proud of what you see? Can you be proud of the work that you did, knowing that you poured every ounce of your heart and soul into trying to create something or build something or manage something that led to positive changes or positive impact, and is sustainable after you are gone? Because once you're done there, if everything falls to pieces the next day, my outlook on things is you did a terrible job because you were making decisions for you, and you were making decisions that were about you, and they weren't about the greater good, if you will. And so that's the whole concept behind the book is when your time in that seat is done, when you look back on it, are you proud of the work that you did, during that period of time? And is that entity, whether it's an entire organization or just a unit, a team, or heck, it could be yourself and how you led yourself during a season of your life. Once that season comes to an end, can you look back on it and can you be proud of the work that you did? And are you confident that the foundation that you laid during that time has created an environment for continual success after you're gone? And also trying to help leaders understand that all of the sacrifices and all of the work that you're pouring into things right now, a lot of it's not meant for you to see, that fruit come to bear, if you will. I think I shared a story in the book where, there was something that I was fighting for while I was in Ferguson. And it was something that we desperately needed, but I didn't have the support from leadership to get it done. And I'm fighting, and I just was met with nothing but resistance in getting it done. And so a few years later, while I'm the chief here in Apex, I get a text one day from one of my former colleagues in Ferguson, and my colleague was like, "Hey, just thought about you because I just signed off on the paperwork for X, and I remember the fight that you were having in trying to get support for X, and they wouldn't go along with it. But now, all these years later, new chief in place, that chief didn't have to put up the same fight that I had to put up, because what I was after wasn't something for me. It was something that was needed, whether I was there or whether I wasn't there. And so my fighting laid the foundation for, and it wasn't even the next chief, it was 2 chiefs after I left.
Wow.
That chief was able to get it approved and to get it, to get it executed. That was going to help the department, help the officers, and all of that stuff. And so it's things like that to where, when we're in the moment and we're fighting for things and we're trying to get things done and we're being met with resistance, of course that's going to be frustrating and that's going to be, difficult to deal with and all of those things. But when you understand the principles of I'm done here, creating lasting impact by leading with intentionality and being intentional about what it is that you're trying to do and what it is that you're fighting for, and how these things are going to be beneficial for the greater good, regardless if you are sitting in the seat or somebody else is sitting in the seat. When you understand those principles, then you can be just as happy and appreciative when 2 chiefs after me, they got it signed off and got it done, and I was just as happy about it as if I would have been if I was still the chief there when it finally got done. So that's the concept of the book, and the title, the book title more specifically, and just going through, my ascension in this profession and my unique climb to the chief seat. When I became the interim chief in Forest Park, I was 38 years old, and that is relatively young for a police chief. And then I got the Ferguson chief job when I was 39. And so I climbed rather quickly to the chief seat, and then just the unique experiences, that I had being the chief in Ferguson, and even coming here to Apex, and some of the things that I had to navigate and deal with here. There are principles in the book that any leader can benefit from. You don't have to be in law enforcement. You don't have to be in public safety. It's for anybody. And what I always say is for anybody that is a current, emerging, or aspiring leader. In reading the book, you're going to get some nuggets of information that can help you navigate the challenges of leadership, because that's all leadership is, the higher up you are, the more challenges you have to deal with, because the more people issues, the more people problems you have to navigate and deal with. And sometimes, we make those issues harder on ourselves than they need to be. And so hopefully somebody reading my book will get some nuggets of information that'll help them navigate those things a little bit better.
Now, to author a book, was that something that you always dreamed of, or was it more so spontaneous after you took a minute to reflect on your career path?
It was not something that I always dreamed of. Once I got the Ferguson job, people at least once a month would talk to me about writing a book. And it was just something that just became a part of just the regular conversation of things, especially like once George Floyd was killed, and, navigating the riots and Ferguson 2.0, if you will, the second storm of riots and civil unrest and things. And with COVID, intertwined in that, and just all of the things that went into that. And then I started doing more public speaking, and speaking at conferences or different events and stuff, and sharing my story and the challenges and just the different things that I had to navigate, and obstacles and how you overcome things. And so as I started speaking more, people that would hear me speak would start asking like, hey, do you have a book? So I'm always like, no, I don't. And the follow-up question was always, well, when is your book coming out? Because, I know you didn't cover everything that you have to talk about. Like, I would love to read more about your journey in the book. So just gained a lot of momentum once I got to Ferguson. And so then once I realized that I was going to be retiring, so in 2023, by the end of 2023, I knew I was going to retire in 24. And so once I had made that decision and started thinking about, okay, what my transition was going to look like, and started gearing up for, the second act of my career, if you will, just navigating that, and the more people that I talked to about things, the book started gaining a lot more traction. And I had an executive coach at the time, and he and I started talking about it. And he gave me a lot of good guidance, because every time somebody would talk to me about writing a book, my excuse was always, I don't have time to write a book. Like, I'm a police chief. I'm busy every day. Like, I work every single day. Even if I'm at home, I'm in emails, addressing stuff, or phone calls, text messages. Like, there wasn't a single day that I did not look at something or do something for being a police chief. So I'm like, I don't have any free time. Like, writing a book is not something that I could do. But he didn't let me get away with that excuse. And so he would just offer up all of these challenges, like, well, you could get a ghostwriter, or you could do this, or you could get this, get that. And so that got me looking into different ways to get a book done. And ultimately I found a publisher that I liked their process, and I felt confident that I could do their process in a decent amount of time to get my book done.
Now, I understand within your book, you discuss a framework, PIE, P-I-E, that you
community PIE.
Community PIE,
Yep.
yes, that you utilize throughout your career. Care to share a little bit about what that acronym means?
Yeah. So, I told you earlier about that first experience after that barbershop event, and then us being able to get the young man out of the house, right? And so after I saw the power that had, I would just try to get as innovative and creative with my thinking of different ways that we could engage with the community. And so along the lines, or along the journey somewhere, I came up with the PIE acronym. One is PIE, like, man, who doesn't like PIE, right? And so PIE stands for partnerships, innovation, and empowerment. And man, my stance on it is, if we are being intentional about trying to cultivate partnerships out in the community as law enforcement, if we're intentional about trying to cultivate partnerships, and we are open to how varying and wide-ranging those partnerships can be, that's going to position us to be that much more innovative in what it is that we are creating. in addition to that, if we can empower both inside the police department and everybody inside the police department and also people out in the community to understand the role that they can play and what this looks like, man, I just found that that was the recipe for success. And, you know, one thing that helped me in my journey is I was willing to partner and work with anybody. And while I was in Ferguson, I met this brother that goes by DT. And, you know, I have to give a shout out, you rest in peace to DT. He unexpectedly passed away last year. But me and DT just met on a whim one evening, you know, got to talking about some things. He found out who I was. And at that time, he was very passionate about starting a mentoring program. You know, DT had a challenging life up to that point, and you know, he had made decisions in life that, you know, took him on a certain path and a certain journey, and he was at a place in life where he wanted to help young people not make some of the same decisions or some of the same mistakes that he made. And so he was very passionate at this point about trying to help young men, trying to help, you know, young males grow into be good stewards in the community. So he and I are talking and just trying to figure out, like, man, what is something that we can partner on to do something that was creative and wasn't so, something that wasn't so heavy, if you will, about trying to get, you know, police and community members together on something. So, like, I play basketball, and basketball has always been just the love of my life, and I could play basketball any day for hours just on my own. And so we started talking about putting together a basketball game. And I had always wanted to do this. I just had never been in a position to pull it off. And so we started talking on it, we started working on it. So I was responsible for getting a team of law enforcement officers together, and DT was responsible for getting a team of kids, you know, young people from the community together for us to play this game. So, man, we set everything up, man, we come out, so we called it Balling with a Cop. And the beauty of it is the kids didn't know who we were. So the kids just knew that they were playing against adults. And these are, you know, teenagers. And so we come in, so, you know, they got jerseys, we got jerseys. The mentors from the mentoring group that DT started, they got referee outfits on, whistles, like the whole thing is it's a legit game. There was a trophy for the winning team and the whole nine. They had the media there and all of this stuff covering it. So we played this game. Naturally, you know, they cheated for the kids' favor, so the kids won. But after the game, man, we sit all of them down and we start talking to them, and that's when they find out that, man, they just got done playing with the police chief. That guy right there, he's the police officer. That woman right there, she's the police officer. And then we just talked to them where they were introduced to us in a different space. They were introduced to us as, you know, we were just competitors in a sports game. And you know, I used one of the pictures in some of my training classes. My wife was there, and she took a picture of me talking to some of the kids after the game, because we're standing there and we're just talking smack to each other about the game, like you would expect to find in any gym that you go into. You know, after everybody gets done hooping, you know, you're gonna be talking about the different play that you made. Oh, I got you on this one, or I crossed you up, or whatever the case. And so me and these kids, they're surrounded. It's three of them, I think, in this picture, and we're just going back and forth, talking about the game, talking smack to each other. And it doesn't matter that I'm the police chief. They're not looking at me as the police chief. Like I said earlier, man, they got to meet Jason Armstrong. And that was the experience. Fast forward a few months. Now I'm at work, I'm in uniform, and I'm driving through Southeast Ferguson. So that was the area where Mike Brown was shot and killed. That's where we have a lot of our challenges in Ferguson. And I see one of the kids from the basketball game, one of the kids that was in that picture that I was talking to, walking down the street. And so I pull over and I get out my car, and so I'm behind him, so he's walking away when I pull over. And so I get out and I just yell out to him to get his attention. So he turns around and he looks back at me. And what I saw in his face that day that I normally don't see was, I just saw the look of familiarity. And I didn't see that fight or flight that I normally see when somebody turns and looks when I get out, and it's like, oh crap, it's the police. Like, you know, are they about to mess with me, or am I in trouble? Whatever the case may be. I call out to him, he turns around, he sees me there in uniform, and it's like, oh, hey man, what's up, man? And then we just came and had a little conversation, checked on him, man, see how he was doing, how the family was doing and everything. And then he went on about his way. And so, you know, the fact that we were able to build something like that, and just me partnering with a guy in the community, a guy that, you know, had a checkered past and probably would not have passed a background check to become a police officer. Like, none of that stuff mattered. Like, what he was trying to do present day in the community was something that I could get behind. It was something that could help the community as a whole. And so why wouldn't I partner with him on the efforts and the things that he's trying to do right now? Because he can reach a segment of the community that I can't reach. Now, if I'd have been the one to go out there, one of my officers in uniform, trying to get those kids, the first one we did, I think we had over 70 kids come out for that event. If I'd have gone out there and like, hey, you know, police, we want y'all to come out here and play a basketball game with us, I don't think I'm getting 70 kids from that community, from that part of the community, to come into that gym. And so, man, that's the power and the value of those partnerships and those relationships. And the more that I was able to do those things, like the more results that I had to show. And that's why the one of the last chapters in my book is called The Results, because I just talk about all of the work and all of the things that I poured into the work that I was doing and how I was trying to show up and how I was trying to lead. Now I can give people, these are some of the results that came from doing that work. And I'm not anybody special. I'm no different than anybody else. I'm no better than anybody else. If I could do this and have success with it, to where last week I got inducted into the National Law Enforcement Officer Hall of Fame because of what I built and what I did over my career, those 70 plus kids that was in the gym that day, man, they could all do the same thing. Because one of the things that I talked about in my Hall of Fame speech was, in my graduating class in high school, I was number 196 out of 245. So I'm at the bottom. I'm at the bottom. I wasn't on anybody's most likely to succeed list. And look what I've been able to do with my career. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And so Community Pie was just, you know, my framework of trying to encourage everybody to understand that when we talk about community policing, like, all of that responsibility doesn't fall on the police department. There's way more members in the community than there are members of the police department. Community members, this is how you can be innovative and creative. And I'm empowering you to do things in this space, to give opportunities for us to come partner on some things and for us to see what we can create together that's going to be beneficial for the community at large.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me want to kind of dig in a little bit more into that book as well. I mean, that's a lot of truth in what you're saying. It takes a collective.
Absolutely.
And it needs to be, everybody needs to feel included. I feel as though when people feel included in what you're doing and you invite them in, you're going to get the best results out of them.
You are. And when you're intentional, and that was, you know, I use the word intentional a lot because for me, the two best compliments that I got throughout my career, and also what carried over into my personal life, was that I'm authentic in who I am, and I'm intentional about what it is that I do or what it is that I'm trying to accomplish with what I'm doing. And, you know, man, what I experienced in my career is that if you're being genuine with people, and like I said, you don't change up the messaging, you know, you're not him-hawing around on what it is that you're saying, man, people can accept the things that you are providing to them, even if they don't like it, a whole lot better. And even working with some activist members in the community and different things, you know, where they didn't like my stance on some things, but they appreciated how I talked to them about it and my willingness to speak to it and to not beat around the bush on it and to be just direct with them and candid in what it is that I'm talking about. Because, like I said, you know, I'm not overly impacted by if they like what I'm saying or not. And so that's not my aim. I'm not trying to make you happy by what it is that I'm saying. My only aim and goal is for you to understand where I'm coming from, for you to understand the decision that I'm making, or for you to understand, the different implications of things that I have to factor into my decision, or why I made the decision that I made. And I remember I got a handwritten note from this one group after we had a meeting. And one of the things that they said in their note was, we appreciate how candid you were in our discussion. And so it's not about, making people, happy, or not your aim being to make them happy or to make them like what it is that you're doing. But if they trust that what you're doing is coming from a real, genuine place, and you can explain, why it is that you're doing what you're doing and what all goes into it, where they have the confidence that you're not just saying this, or you're not just pulling this out of nowhere, that you actually, have invested some time, effort, and energy into it, and you can speak with a knowledge level about what it is that you're doing or what it is that you're trying. People have confidence in that. And at the end of the day, when it comes to leadership, regardless if people like you as the leader or not, they want to have confidence in you as the leader. And that's the respect piece. And you hear people talk all the time about, individuals, you may not like me and all this other stuff, but you will respect me. Well, I don't want people to respect my title or respect the position that I have. I want people to respect the individual because of what I have shown them, and the consistency with how I show up. Whether or not they are a fan of everything that I do, or they're a fan of my outlook, or they agree with my philosophy on policing or not. But if they have the confidence in me and they know, when things get, as difficult as they can get, all right, I know this guy is going to show up and he's going to lead. And people having that confidence in you as a leader, that should be what your aim is, and nothing else.
Perfectly said, perfectly said. Well, Jason, do you have any lasting comments that you want to leave our audience with, or just anything to encapsulate this conversation? If not, it's fine.
Nah, man, I appreciate the conversation, man. I always love talking about these things whenever I get a chance to. I would just encourage people, if you haven't picked up a copy of my book yet, definitely go to jasonparmstrong.com and check out my website, check out my book, and I would love to hear from you. There's a special QR code in there for people who have the book. If they want to schedule a meeting with me to talk about the book or anything like that, people have the ability to do that also.
Awesome. Well, Jason, it was truly a pleasure to meet you in person and to hear firsthand your story, your trajectory within your career. Let me tell you, being on the receiving end of your words, wealth of passion, wealth of experience, and most importantly, a wealth of wisdom. I mean, I could see how you could rile up a team and rile up a department and, stand strong and stand firm in what you believe in,
yeah,
even if you had some oppositions against you, because I could feel it. You're a very confident, grounded individual, and I can see why you have garnered the success that you talk about to this day and inspire people. So I want to say thank you so much for your time. I know that your time is precious and your time is valuable, and I appreciate you sitting down here and getting your story out. Thank you so much.
No, man, happy to do it. Appreciate it, man.
Yep.